What is going on, y'all? Jesus, it's been a long day. If you did not know, we've been trying to get this live stream up for the whole day, basically. I've been working on the OBS overlay and the OBS settings and uh, all of the OBS shit, and it all added up to, in the end, not even using OBS at all. So great, just great. But we're here. We're ready to talk some football, and thank the Lord for that, man. Oh my God.
Well, I echo all of Emmy's opening sentiments. Um, we've been working in tandem for basically the past, ever since this afternoon, to try and figure out the whole OBS live stream. And it seemed every time we would hit a new, every time we tried, we would hit a new roadblock. One time it would, it wouldn't load. Another time it'd be a problem with YouTube. Another time it might be, a problem with the audio. It just at at the end, we just decided at this point we've come this far. We had to get something in, so we're using a different streaming service. But as Emmy said, we're here, and we're going to react to what was the greatest round of the playoffs, I think, of our lifetime. I think that can be said like
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
This week's NFL divisional round, 4 games, all four decided by walk-offs. 3 walk-off field goals and 1 walk-off touchdown in an overtime period in the last game, which was the Bills at the Chiefs. Now, I'll just open the conversation by saying I have to give you lots of credit because on our divisional preview episode, you were on fire basically this weekend. I was not in particular. I somehow missed on all four of my predictions. I picked the Titans. I picked the Packers. Obviously, both 1 seeds got knocked out in different ways, but in similar stupid fashions. And then I also picked the Bucks. We actually agreed on that one. That was the one we agreed on, and we both lost that. But I picked the Bills. You picked the Chiefs. So I think you ended up going 3-1. I ended up going 0-4. And you pointed out a lot of, um, I guess, sub points or keys that actually ended up playing a big factor in a lot of these games. Um, so credit to you, especially on that Green Bay special team stuff. That's basically the reason that they're not advancing to the playoffs. There are some other reasons, of course. We'll get into the whole Aaron Rodgers thing here in a little bit. But that was one of the main culprits for why Green Bay is not advancing. So I know it's been a long day. I know we've been going all over the place. So why don't we just start there? Why don't we just start with the San Francisco Green Bay game since I already kind of got us going on that track?
Yeah. This game, I mean, with the way it started, you were just like, it had the feeling of, okay, Green Bay came to play. They looked sharp. Aaron Rodgers was dealing early. They were running the football, and they drove down the field with basically no resistance. I don't even think they got to a third down that entire drive, and it was smooth sailing that entire first drive. But that was the only one they had the entire game, which was what made it worse, to be honest. The fact that they were able to do it the first drive of the game and then didn't do it the rest of the game uh, made it sting a little bit more, I think, for Packers fans for sure. But The thing to me that was so huge in this game that people aren't talking about is the fact that Marquez Valdez-Scantling didn't play. Obviously, the fact that David Bakhtiari didn't play is well documented, and obviously the offensive line didn't play fantastic. That's fair, and they definitely didn't. But the fact that Aaron Rodgers didn't trust any of these other receivers makes a difference, you know? And I was one who uh, scrutinized the decision to pay Aaron Jones in the offseason. And, you know, he's been good this season. But for me, I just thought that if you went out into free agency and you got a veteran number 2 wide receiver like a Marvin Jones or someone of that caliber, or even, you know, OBJ was available, you know, and they were rumored to be interested, but they weren't, in the end, they weren't aggressive enough to go get him. So I think that was a big mistake by the Packers in the offseason. But, you know, uh, it's still on Aaron Rodgers that he got into the mode where he was relying on Devontae Adams a lot. Um, I believe 18 of his 20 passes were intended for Aaron Jones or Devontae Adams, which is it's stunning, to be honest. And there's clips going around the internet of the play where Alan Lazard was running a crossing route across the middle of the field, and Aaron Rodgers ignored him and threw it into triple coverage to Devontae Adams deep. And, you know, there's just something was off. Obviously, Aaron, he's a guy who, if he doesn't trust you, if he doesn't have the trust that you're going to make the play, he's not going to throw it to you. And with the Packers knowing that going into the season, I just didn't understand why they didn't make the effort to go get somebody. And, you know, they got Randall Cobb, but I mean, I guess that sort of counts, but man, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, though.
Well, we'll start with Aaron Rodgers. Nobody questions his talent. Nobody questions that he's one of the greatest, best quarterbacks that we've ever seen play the game of football. Like he's got all the tools. We know that. The physical tools, the arm to throw, all that stuff. Nobody ever questions that he's a great quarterback. He's the passer rating guy, the guy that, you know, doesn't throw any interceptions or, you know, not a whole lot of interceptions. He generally takes care of the football. And he's been playing at an MVP level, undeniably, the past, you know, couple of seasons. He won the MVP last year. He was in the MVP conversation all this year. In some people's eyes, he was the front runner to win the MVP. And maybe still is. I have no idea. But the things that should come into the question, his leadership, his ability to foster relationships, and accountability. Those are the three things, the intangibles, that I think should be questioned with Aaron Rodgers. And you brought up a great point that I originally basically exactly was thinking of. Outside of Devontae Adams and an occasional Aaron Jones screen pass or something like that out on the flat, it was clear night and day that he just did not trust anybody else. And at the end of the day, we all know that Devontae Adams is basically unstoppable most of the time, right? We know that Aaron Jones is a really good football player. But at the end of the day, you got to do a better job, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. We're not inside the organization. We don't know what goes on. But you got to be able to foster better relationships and build more trust with your number 2 and your number 3 receivers. It's just how it is. I don't know, we all know that Aaron's very defensive. He can get very defensive. He's kind of prickly guy. He likes to defend his reputation. He doesn't like all the criticism. He's not, he doesn't really deal with all that very well. And after everything that went on this past offseason, and the press conference where he basically, banged on the Green Bay front office, like you're running out of excuses. Like you had, I think, what was a great defense. San Francisco's offense for basically the entire game was anemic. I don't think they got into the red zone one time. So your defense played great. You had guys stepping up. I mean, you had Zardarius Smith back. You had Jair Alexander back. Rashawn Gary was playing out of his mind, pass rushing. The 49ers, outside of, and I know there were some drop passes and some weird, things in the beginning, but outside of a couple plays by Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, really didn't have anything going offensively. Green Bay, I think, had a really good game plan defensively, and they had a really good defense. And because Aaron Rodgers, and it's not all on him, but because it seems he likes to point fingers, there's no accountability, and he's too reliant on Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, the guys that he trusts, the only guys that he seems to trust, they're sitting here and they're going home. They're going home to watch football just like we are. And then the special teams. That's really the main culprit for why they lost the game. We got the Aaron Rodgers side of things, and then we have the special teams. The defense did its job. No question about it. I didn't dig deep enough into this in our preview. You did. Last season, in 2020, the Packers were dead last in kick return yardage and punt return yardage gained last season. Last offseason, they proceeded to fire their special teams coach. Matt LaFleur fired the special teams coach because it was bad. But instead of hiring someone outside of the organization to, come in and maybe fix this externally, they promoted their assistant special teams coach, which I didn't even know existed as a position, Maurice Drayton, and the special teams got worse. Now, I don't know if that's a coaching issue or if it's just, I don't know what it is. But under Drayton this year, Green Bay finished last in the NFL in special teams DVOA. According to Football Outsiders, they were 30th or worse on field goals, extra points, kick returns, and punt returns. There were blocked field goals, inexplicable miscommunications on kickoffs, and they allowed one of the two. There were only 2 punt returns for touchdowns this year in the NFL. They allowed one of them. So all around, it was a complete disaster. They had a field goal blocked at the end of the first half where Jimmy Ward just came in unblocked. That was a clear miscommunication, it seems like. Then you had the 45-yard Deebo Samuel return on the kickoff to open up the half and set up the Niners in great field position at midfield. And then on the game-winning field goal by San Francisco, Green Bay couldn't even get the right amount of players on the football field. They had 10 players on the field. Not that it would have mattered. He made the kick, and they're going home. But there was just so many things that I didn't really think would play this big of a factor. But at the end of the day, man, from now on, I'm going to be looking for these type of things because there are 3 phases in football. That's what we all have to remember. Offense and defense, what we love to talk about, but then special teams. And San Francisco, they've had their problems too, but they've ultimately found ways to make plays on special teams. And they were better in all 3 phases. So, and I brought up an interesting conversation about Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance while we were watching the game on Saturday night. But I honestly think save that for another. That's for off-season fodder rather than right now.
Right. But let's shift to giving the 49ers their credit.
Absolutely.
That 49ers defense, the complete shift of that defense. I mean, they were solid all year, but they weren't like this. They all of a sudden became elite. And I think back to when they got Greenlaw back at that linebacker position. I think that really solidified the middle of that defense, and it made it easier for everybody in that secondary behind them. So obviously that's not the only thing, but I mean, man, just the D line was just they were playing like they have rabies. That's something that Brett Coleman said on his podcast, and I was like, wow, he's exactly right because they are. They're just playing crazed, and there's just so much energy that they play with. Just in the running game, they're just flying around. I mean, wow, just really impressive to watch how they just dismantled this Packers offense because the Packers offense isn't just Aaron Rodgers. They have a really good running game, and it was non-existent the entire day.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing what it seems to me that what we have left, the 4 teams remaining. If you notice the trend nowadays, all 4 coaches that are left have offensive backgrounds, right? This is what we know. We know the league's going this way. Rules are adjusted to help the offense. 15 years ago, it was more, the defense had more leeway in terms of what they could do. But now, offensive coaches, clever offensive schemes and coaches are winning in this. This is what's winning Super Bowls in this league at the end of the day. If you can get a clever head coach like Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay or Andy Reid, even Zach Taylor, you have the quarterback and you can just make the right hire at the defensive coordinator position. Bruce Arians with Todd Bowles. I can go on and on. That's the formula nowadays. And it seems to me, I don't know exactly who the defensive coordinator for the 49ers is at this particular moment in time. But we all know 2 years ago with how it all worked out with Shanahan calling the offense, Robert Saleh being the defensive guy. It seems to me that's what's working in today's NFL, and give credit where credit is due. I mean, they deserve all of it. I said before the postseason, before they even got in, I said the 49ers are going to be dangerous, and I think they can win not even 1, but maybe 2 playoff games. And that's exactly what they've done. And I think, for a lot of that game, it was either Jimmy G throwing something over the middle to Deebo Samuel or George Kittle, or it was him lobbing these weird lollygag passes out in the flat, one of which I think was intercepted. And it was just a nerve-wracking game for every throw he made. Like, it just worries you, and that's why, there's questions about him as a franchise quarterback. But regardless, he I mean, he needs the help, of course, but he keeps on winning games in the playoffs
Yeah.
and doing what's required, like doing the bare minimum to win football games.
Right.
So
And I told you this in our text conversation as well. He is a really good leader. Like you see how his teammates respond when he makes a great play or when he does something well. They really rally around this dude. And that's, I mean, I wouldn't say it's rare, but um the combination of that with the players that they have, it really bodes itself to winning. Because he doesn't win you a game, but he also doesn't lose you the game. Because I mean, the interception that he threw, I mean, the Packers got it at what their own 15-yard line. So I mean, it's not like he was throwing an interception like at his own goal line and just giving the Packers points. So you know, uh, he's he's done enough to get it done. That's for sure.
So overall, it was a great. I mean, it's kind of what I thought San Francisco was. Um, Dominant, still dominant on the defensive front seven. If the defensive front can dominate, the secondary is good enough. It's not great, but it's good enough. And at the end of the day, with their running game in the clever offensive schemes that they run with Kyle Shanahan and the playmakers that they have, Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough to win playoff games and even get you to a Super Bowl if you have the right pieces around him. We'll see if he's able to, win the big moment. But we'll get into. We're not going to preview any of the NFC Championship game yet. Let's just move on to the next game on Saturday, which was we'll hit on this one relatively quickly. The Bengals and the Titans.
Yeah. With this game, man, I mean, what really stood out was that Tennessee defensive line, man. Oh my God. They they are 100% legit. And we knew that coming in, but and we knew that it would be a good matchup for them against this Bengals offensive line, but we've seen the Bengals play a lot this season and against a normal defensive line, like they're not great, but they don't look like that. Like they were not only getting beat off the ball, some of their guys weren't even able to get a hand on these dudes. They were just so quick. Uh, Denico Autry was just a beast in the middle. They couldn't do anything with him the whole game. Uh, and it's just, stunning that it all equaled up to be a loss in the end. You know, it's interesting that my dad made an interesting point. He said Foreman was really solid for them in this game when he got the ball, and Henry wasn't able to be as effective as he usually is. And I agreed with that generally. I think if they split up the carries a little bit more between them, gave Henry a little bit of a lighter workload just to kind of ease his way in. And I know it's the playoffs, I get it, but you got to put your best players on the field. If you see he's not being effective, um, and it was clear that he wasn't as explosive as he normally is. Uh, I mean, he was clearly a little bit gimpy out there. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but uh, I just think Foreman, with that big run he had in the second half, they should have kind of rode the hot hand from that point on. But uh, they stuck with Henry, and I, I I can respect it. I mean, he's your best player. You got to kind of, like I said with the Cowboys. stick with the dude that got you to there. But I don't know. It didn't work out in the end.
At the end of the day, I still believe that the Tennessee Titans are a better football team at this particular juncture than the Cincinnati Bengals. However, if the best team won every game, well, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about like anything. It would just be all chalk all the time. At the end of the day, it's what you said in the preview. if you have the coach and you have the better quarterback, there's a good chance. I mean, you have a chance every single Sunday, no matter who you're playing, no matter what the circumstances are. And at the end of the day, Ryan Tannehill made the mistakes that he shouldn't have made. I mean, I've never seen a team manhandle another team in the trenches that, like, obviously that badly and find a way to lose. But it seemed all season when the Titans lost, it was because they turned the football over and they shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. The loss to the Jets, the loss to the Texans, the loss to Pittsburgh, 4 turnovers in that game. I mean, it was just a continuing trend. I thought there were some poor play calls. I'm not going to get into all the minutia of that. I didn't think it was Mike Vrabel's best game as a head coach. He's had a lot better Sundays or a lot better Saturdays than that. But at the end of the day, Ryan Tannehill made costly mistakes that a veteran like him should not make. And, you know, Joe Burrow, despite being sacked 9 times, and quarterbacks that were sacked coming into this game, quarterbacks that were sacked 7 or more times this season were 0-9. He was sacked 9 times, actually 10 or 11 times, but the other 2, those plays were called dead. And I was scared there for a minute, like the late hit, no blowing whistles. He was getting hit after the whistle, all that stuff. But regardless, he was under constant pressure. He was sacked 9 times, lost 68 yards on those rushes, on those sacks. 9 times ties a playoff record. The losing 68 yards ties for second most in NFL history. He dropped back 47 times and was pressured on 15 of those dropbacks. I mean, it was just complete domination, whether it was Danico Autry on the interior or Harold Landry and Bud Dupree coming off the edge. The resiliency, I think that's one thing you can say about this Bengals team is they're resilient. The offensive line got dominated, but not one time did you see Joe Burrow get up from a sack and start to chew out or say anything, bad to his offensive line. He just kept playing, and the Bengals found a way to get the job done because Ryan Tannehill and the Titans offense could not hold on to the ball. So, I mean, it was sort of that type of weekend, the weekend of defying odds and the trends that have been happening in today's NFL. Quarterbacks that are sacked that much usually don't win football games. And the stats prove it, as I just laid out. And they found a way to win somehow. And I'll get to other examples of that when we talk about the other 2 games. But not the best coach game from Mike Vrabel and his coaching staff. I agree they should have run the ball with Foreman more. Henry, he had his moments, but he still didn't look like himself. When Foreman did run, they were very effective. Tannehill, there's nothing you can say other than he made some costly mistakes. And I just don't know how you lose a football game where you manhandle a team in the trenches like that badly. But
yeah, but I will say this though. he did make some good plays. He made some. I'd say in that middle stretch of the game, from the second quarter to the third quarter, he seemed to really settle into the game and make some really nice plays. A lot of them were to AJ Brown, some of them were to Julio, but he really settled in there. And then once he threw that second interception, things kind of fell off the rails. But shout out to Jesse Bates, though. Jesse Bates played a heck of a game. He balled out the entire game uh, from start to finish. But we will move on to our next game. I guess we'll do the Rams and Bucks first, since we'll go in an order, kind of. So I'll let you start off.
Well, I still believe that, and you can argue this, we're not going to get into this argument right now, but the Rams on their best days, I mean, you can argue the Chiefs, a couple other teams, but I think the Rams, when they have everything put together and they bring their A game, they might be the best, most complete team in the entire league. First of all, this entire playoff run, these two games, you've seen all of the trade acquisitions that they have made over the past couple of years. You've seen all of them make plays. In the wild card game, it was the Odell Beckham show. In this game, Von Miller made plays off the edge. He had a strip sack and a couple other, plays that he made. He came to life. Of course, Stafford. He was definitely not part of what was almost an epic collapse. We'll get to that in a minute. But Stafford with big throws and big moments. Everyone contributed. So give credit where credit is due. I think that's a credit to Sean McVay. They looked very prepared. Tampa looked flat coming out. And I think, quite frankly, and we may have said this, we probably said this millions of times coming into this game on our preview episode, just like last year, kind of with Kansas City, even though Kansas City ended up making it further, Tampa was just at the end sort of just derailed by injuries, and they just didn't have enough left. You clearly saw that the loss of Tristan Wirfs hurt them. Aaron Donald controlled the line of scrimmage for much of the first half, for much of the game, quite frankly. And Tom Brady just didn't have the protection or the time, and he never really looked comfortable until they were really making a run there in the fourth quarter. And he was being set up with short fields, but I thought the Rams on both sides of the football were able to control the line of scrimmage, even without, I believe it was their two starting safeties, Andrew Whitworth and Robert Woods. I still think they were hands down the better football team on Saturday, and give credit where credit is due to Matthew Stafford. What a throw to Cooper Kupp. And I just don't even know at this point, like, how does he get open every single play? I don't know. Like, it's honestly mind-blowing at this point to me, the season that he's having. But I don't know what I did to Cam Akers. Naming him the prospect of the week last week, and rightfully so, but it happens. We've seen this happen many times before, not only in that Super Bowl against the Falcons, but, when you're playing against a legend like Tom Brady and you're up by, that many, you're up by a couple possessions, things are going great. When it gets to those later portions in the game, as Mike Tomlin once said, things can get a little tight. And that's what the Rams did. They got tight. And it's crazy because coming in to this game, the Rams lost 5 fumbles all season. And in this one half, this quarter and a half, they lost 4 fumbles. Well, I guess it was a half and a play because at the end of the half, they had a chance to go up 27-3, basically put a dagger, not a dagger considering what happened, but they had a chance to go up even more. And Cam Akers fumbled at the 2-yard line or whatever. Tampa didn't end up doing anything with that, but I mean, the other Cam Akers fumble, the miscommunication on the snap, the Cooper Kupp fumble, and give Tampa credit. They definitely had a part in, forcing those fumbles. It wasn't just, flat out buffoonery by the Rams. But at the end of the day, I'm rambling. Um, the Rams and Aaron Donald, Von Miller controlled the line of scrimmage. Brady never seemed to get in a rhythm. It was either Gronk, Leonard Fournette, or really nothing until Mike Evans later in the game. And he just didn't have the protection he usually does, never got comfortable. Rams won the line of scrimmage, and Stafford played fantastic. And they couldn't stop Cooper Kupp at the end of the day. They let the one guy beat them that shouldn't have beat them. But
Yeah. Man, where do I start? You know, the scariest thing about the Rams to me is the fact that I don't think we've seen their best football yet. I don't think we've seen their best football of this version of the Rams with Von Miller and Odell Beckham. I don't think we've seen their best football yet, which is just crazy to me. Because Von Miller, when he first got there, he wasn't healthy, and that was when Matthew Stafford was struggling. And then they got Cam Akers back, and he gave them a new juice to their running game, opened up their running game a little bit, and then he gets the fumble bug. It's just like, when is this team gonna stop shooting themselves in the foot? Because when they figure it out, they, I mean, they have a really good shot at winning this whole thing, if they just figure out their little shooting themselves in the foot problem. I don't know how to put that into a word, but uh, let's talk about the game. I just have to commend like Tom Brady so much, man, because that Rams defense. I don't know if there's many quarterbacks in football that could have, I mean, with his lack of mobility, that could have survived in that pocket the way he did. Um, the way he navigates the pocket is just so underrated. The way he steps up in the pocket and finds little gaps and just manipulates defenders with the way he moves, I think is probably the most underrated part of his game. Um, and he was patient. He kept on attacking. Um, and I hate to kick a guy while he's down, but uh, the fact that he put trust in these receivers that hadn't had the experience, the Scotty Millers of the world, he gave them a shot. He was throwing them the ball. He was like, okay, you're open. You have the one-on-one matchups. I'm gonna go to you. It's either you make the play or you don't. Um, he's probably the best leader at the quarterback position of all time. He's the best quarterback of all time, and it showed in that game time and time again. Obviously, he got a ton of breaks. Obviously, the one where the center flew it over Stafford's head. At that point, I was like, "What the heck?" I mean, I'm just gonna say, I was just like, "What the fuck is happening?" I was so just baffled. I was like, "This is not gonna happen again. There's no way. There is no way this is happening again." And he freaking tied it up, and I was just like, "Oh God." I was just he freaking did it again, and uh man, what a game. I don't. I don't even know how to break that down because it was so bizarre. The whole thing.
The only way I can describe it is the way I just described it, and that is the Rams dominated up until late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and then they got a little tight, and that's when things went south. That's the only way I can describe it. There are not a lot of ways to accurately describe what went on in some of these games, especially the next game we're going to talk about, and the final game we're going to talk about. But ultimately, I'll hold the same position. Um, Once the Rams play their best football, and I think that's a great point. It seems they play their best football, but it's not their best football. I think that's a great point you brought up. Like once they get to that point, like they're going to be so incredibly hard to beat. So I don't know. I just think the aggressiveness of this organization has paid off. It's gotten them this far, and they're going to have to overcome a couple more demons here in the near future. Sean McVay, 0-6 against his daddy, Kyle Shanahan. Um, there are a couple things they still have to get, a couple roadblocks they still have to get through, but regardless, they deserve all the props in the world right now, except for almost choking that game.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is that entire collapse, none of it fell on Matt Stafford. Like I had never seen
Exactly.
anything like that to where the quarterback didn't do anything wrong, yet he blew a 27-6 lead and he didn't even do anything wrong. It was unbelievable.
And the
Oh,
crazy
man.
part about it, once the Buccaneers tied it, and there were however many seconds there were left, the crazy thing about it is, like, he may have been freaking out on the inside, like, oh, fuck, what is happening? But, like, it did not seem he was bothered at all. Like, in the huddle at the start of that drive, he got sacked on the first play, I believe. Like, he just did not seem phased at all, to me, from my perspective.
Right.
So you got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, coming from a place like Detroit, no offense to that organization, things are looking up sort of in Detroit. Dan Campbell has those players playing hard, and they have some good young talent. But I think it just says something about this culture that Sean McVay has built. The fact that OBJ has come in and made basically an immediate impact from the start. Bigger impact than I think both of us even thought he could make. Von Miller doing what he did this weekend. Matt Stafford, regardless of the struggles at points and times of the season, still finding ways to get through that and get to this point. I think losing Andrew Whitworth and having Noteboom or whatever his name is fill in that well at left tackle. I mean, I think it just says a lot about the depth that they have at a lot of positions and the culture that they have created in that Rams organization.
Yeah. They really have. And I really want to see more teams be aggressive like the Rams have, because if you're trying to win a championship, what's a first round pick versus having a guy like Jalen Ramsey on your team or Von Miller or whatever the case may be? You gotta take chances. It's hard to win a championship, and obviously sometimes it'll backfire on you, but uh, it's working out so far. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Last game. Sunday evening, Sunday night. And I can't wait to see the viewership numbers for this one. Not that the other ones were, paled in comparison, but they kind of did, honestly. Wow. Where do we even start with this one?
Yeah. Man. I'll just say, I mean, it was the best football game I've ever watched. The fact that it was in the playoffs, and the quarterbacks were playing at that high of a level under that pressure in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. It was I said this earlier. It's rare for a game that looks good on paper to live up to the hype that much. It delivered in every way you could possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's not like these defenses didn't show up. They were making plays in the first half, but once these offenses started humming and they got their rhythm going, there was nothing that uh, these defenses could have done to slow these quarterbacks down. There was absolutely nothing they could have done, and you know their greatness was on full display. Sorry, I have to plug in my computer, but yeah, I mean their greatness was on full display. I mean the way that these two guys were extending plays, the secondaries were having to guard for like 10 seconds, it felt like, on every single play. I mean, at that point, why would you ever run the ball if you're making the defense defend for 10 seconds? That's just unfair.
Yeah. It was unbelievable. Now, I don't like to get into all of these subjective conversations. If you think that was the best football game that you've ever watched, well, you're entitled to your opinion, and I certainly wouldn't argue with you. I'm not going to get into all those conversations. I think I've seen better football games start to finish, but I think the ending of that game is really what people are going to. At the end of the day, it's about what you remember, and people are never going to forget the fourth quarter and overtime, like the final 4 minutes, 2 minutes, where there were
Right.
25 points scored, over 200 yards gained, back and forth, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, the quarterback play was, I'll say this, as otherworldly as I've ever seen, ever. Um, Start with Josh Allen. I put out a tweet earlier, and we'll get to the overtime conversation. We can finish up with that at the end. But I put out a tweet earlier, and I basically said, do I feel bad for Josh Allen? Of course I do. Do I feel bad for the Buffalo Bills? No, I do not. The reason I say that is because the Bills lost this game defensively. I mean, it was so clear as day. They just could not stop this Kansas City Chiefs offense. And it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you could have stopped this Chiefs offense the way it was going. I mean, once they hit the go button and they're locked in and they're playing in that environment, and they get a little push from the Arrowhead crowd, it's really hard to stop. I'm not saying that, but it just seemed like when they needed to get a sack, when they needed to stop Tyreek Hill, when they needed to, take Travis Kelce out of the game, they couldn't do it for whatever reason. Whether that goes on coaching, the players, whatever it was, the number one defense in the NFL could not get a turnover. They could not get off the field on third down, and you can't win against the Chiefs if you don't do those things. But Josh Allen, this postseason, two stats for you guys. Number one, 9 touchdown passes, 12 total incompletions, 0 interceptions. Number two, he had the highest passer rating for any quarterback that has attempted at least 50 passes in one playoff run. and he's going home empty. 149 passer rating in the 2 games put together. Unbelievable, otherworldly play, both with his legs and with his arm. I mentioned the bomb that he threw to cut it to 23-21 near the end of the third quarter to Gabriel Davis. Just unbelievable, showing everything off, everything that he has, even the leadership ability. Every time the Chiefs went ahead, he seemed to answer. And that's, where we'll get into the overtime conversation here in a minute. And then Patrick Mahomes. I mean, basically, every game that he plays in the playoffs, it seems he invents a new way to throw a football. He had this one where he rolled out to the right and threw like a very low sidearm, like laser to, I can't remember who it was, but it was just like how? Like how is that even fair? And his ability to, escape the pocket, avoid sacks, run early on in the game, pick up first downs. With that speed that they have and those weapons, it's just so incredibly hard to stop when he's extending the play. And that's why it was so important for Buffalo to keep him contained in the pocket and for them, when they got there, to make a play. But they just weren't able to do it. So, otherworldly quarterback play. I think Mahomes had a perfect passer rating in the final 2 minutes in overtime. Just unbelievable. If not, it was like as close to perfect as you can get. And at the end of the day, the Bills cannot stop Travis Kelce. But I think at this point, it's an interesting conversation to have. Like, what better trios have we seen in the history of this? Like, at this point, it's getting to the point where, like, this 15-10-87 thing, I don't know. I'm not going to make any blatant statements, but man, I don't even know what to say. And then, of course, Andy Reid. I said it earlier. That's what's winning in this league. It's not to say that defensive coaches still can't have success. Sean McDermott's done a fantastic job with that Bills team. And we've seen other defensive coaches obviously have their fair share of success as well. Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin. We've seen it all. But the NFL is moving in this direction. Offensive coaches, brilliant, clever offensive coaches, is ultimately, for whatever reason, the rule changes, better quarterback play, advantages to the offense. That's what's winning right now in today's NFL. And at this point, good enough, good quarterback isn't good enough. Like, great quarterback, you got to have a great, like, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. Like, you got to have a guy that has something special about him. So there's so much to dissect, but Buffalo just could not get a stop. It was surprising for a defense that was number one all season. By the end of the game, they were just totally fatigued, totally understandable, and they just couldn't find a way to get off the field when they needed to most. And we've talked about it before with, defenses that have playmakers that can go make those plays when you have to have a stop. Like, I don't know how much good is going on in Pittsburgh right now. Now that, you have to find a quarterback, rebuild this offensive line, but they have a guy that when they need a stop, they know they can get a stop. Same thing with the Rams. They have a bunch of guys that they know at the end of the day can come up with the big play. And at the end of the day, I don't think it's not that, a guy like Ed Oliver or Jordan Poyer or the two great safeties that they have or whoever else is on that defense is incapable. They just didn't do it for whatever reason. So I don't know. I think it was the best quarterback duel I've ever seen. I'll just leave it at that.
Right. And it may not have been the greatest football game I've ever seen. That might be recency bias, but yes, it's 100% the best quarterback duel I've ever seen, and that one's going to be remembered for a long time. And that was an instant classic as soon as the game started.
Exactly.
But let's address the elephant in the room: the overtime rules. Um, and we talked about this earlier when we did our live stream that we didn't put out because OBS is stupid. But we talked about it. We basically were saying that this game deserved a better ending than what we got, and the fact that the game's result was decided on a coin flip is a bit disappointing. And you could flip it around. If that coin goes Buffalo's way, I think Buffalo wins that game, and then we're looking at a whole different conversation right now. Can you imagine how much heat uh, Kansas City's kicker would be under right now uh, if they lost that game? I mean, he missed that extra point early as well. So it's, I mean, you people make the argument like, oh, they should have won in regulation. Um, if the coin flipped tails or whatever it was, and it was the Bills' ball, you would be saying the same thing about the Chiefs. It's not really relevant in this game because everybody knew with how that game flowed that there was no chance either of those defense were going to get a stop. That's just how the game was going. I mean, how those quarterbacks were playing. So I think it's definitely a conversation worth having for changing it in the postseason at least. I mean, in the regular season, I mean, you can kind of get away with just leaving it as it is. Obviously, like I'm not a big fan of ties, but that's a whole other conversation. Um, but yeah, well, let's hear your thoughts though.
Okay. I'm going to try to put this more simply and more clearly than I did on our original live stream, which ended up being a whole fuckery.
Yeah.
Okay. This morning, right when I woke up, like I was in bed, getting out of bed, I was thinking about the game because how could you not? How could you not be thinking about what the hell did I just witness the last time that I was awake and paying attention to life on Earth? Um, and, you know, I was going through my Twitter feed and so much conversation about the overtime rules and this and that. People arguing about, how the overtime rules lost the Bills the game. And no, it was the defense that lost in the game. So I went to my Twitter and I put out a tweet. I said the NFL overtime rules need to be changed immediately. Each team should get a possession and ties should get abolished. But let's just forget about the ties for a minute because this is the postseason. Ties can happen in the regular season. I still don't like that. But that's different conversation for another day. Let's forget about the ties for a minute because that does not apply to the postseason. I said each team should get at least one possession. And then I went on to say what I said earlier. Now, do I feel bad for Josh Allen? Of course. Do I feel bad for the Buffalo Bills? Not really. The defense couldn't hold a lead for more than 13 seconds. Now, they were tired. I get it. The game was going in a way where they weren't going to get a stop. I get that point. But at the end of the day, there is an argument to be made that you should be able to, if you consider yourself to be snubbed of Pro Bowlers on defense and playmakers everywhere, and you're the number one defense, you should be able to hold a lead for 13 seconds, regardless of the circumstance. And I do think they screwed up on the kickoff. Why didn't they swim it? But that's
Yeah.
a whole nother conversation. Hours later, after thinking about it a little bit, I put out a clarification tweet. God, I can't talk anymore. I said, regardless of what your opinion on NFL overtime rules is, the Buffalo Bills couldn't get a stop and lost the game defensively. The worst part about it is they allowed Hill and Kelsey to beat them. No Pro Bowlers, and then I got a little snarky. I said, no Pro Bowlers for Buffalo on defense isn't so egregious after all. That may have been a little bit snarky and probably pissed some Bills fans off that saw the tweet if they did, but regardless, at the end of the day, as you said, to sum it all up, them losing the game was not because of overtime. It was because of their defense. And we can make excuses for their defense all day. They were tired, this and that. But at the end of the day, they couldn't get a stop. That's why they lost. It wasn't because of the overtime rules. They're two separate conversations. But in regards to the overtime rules, I do think there needs to be a change. And I've obviously said each team should get at least one possession. But I was talking to my friend in my fraternity earlier at my meeting tonight. We were talking about this exact conversation, and he actually brought up a proposal that I actually sort of really like. He said for the postseason in particular, at least, if the team that gets the ball first drives down and scores a touchdown, okay, let's say they just drive down and score a touchdown. Sorry, I'm butchering this a little bit, but the next team gets a chance. However, if they go down and score a touchdown, they have to go for two to win. So you're getting your chance, but at the same time, you have to go for two to win. So it would make for an interesting conversation because now the team that gets the ball first has to think about that. Like if we score here and we, take the lead and we, just kick the extra point and they go down and score on our defense and they get the 2-point conversion, well, they win the game. So do we go for two on our opening possession? Like it brings in much more strategy and nuance into the game. And so if both teams from that point, if each team scores and it's tied after both teams get a possession, whether they get the 2-point conversion or not, you just play sudden death from that point on. After each team gets a possession, it's sudden death. But at least at that point, you're allowing the defense to get some rest. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting proposal. He also talked about doing something similar to the college football overtime where each team gets a possession starting at like the 20 or 25, and then each time you have 4 downs to score. Each time, each round you push 5 yards back. There are so many ways that I thought were brilliant that he brought up. We can have this conversation. What's the best way another time? But I don't know. What are your thoughts on I know it's sort of confusing the way I laid it out, the 2-point conversion proposal.
No, I actually like that a lot. I understood it. The one that I had heard was a little bit similar to the college system, but instead of at the 25-yard line, it was proposed for more like their own 35. And so basically, you remove kickoffs, you remove punts. So basically, you got to drive down the field and score. And if you do, the other team gets the ball at the 35, going the same direction you did. So it kind of removes the whole like win part of it. So they got to do exactly the same thing you did a second ago, and match that. And then from there, it would be sudden death. But the thing that was interesting about it is um, the second team would have to, or the first team rather would have to like think about whether they would want to go for it on fourth down uh, or so on and so forth. Because if they were to go for it on fourth down, then the other team would get it from that spot and would be able to have that advantage. So yeah, there's so many ways to do it, but I do want to say one thing about what you mentioned earlier with the Bills. I do feel a little twinge of sympathy because I know what it feels like to not be able to last 13 seconds. Like just ask my ex.
Oh, God.
uh,
I
yeah,
mean, to clarify things, I feel sympathy definitely for those fans.
mhm.
Bills Mafia, I love you. I don't know how you're dealing with this. Probably not well, but at the end of the day, just go jump through some more tables and drink
Yep.
ketchup, mustard put together, and you'll be fine. And spray yourselves with mayonnaise and whatever else crazy things you guys do over there. But I think this is a good place to wrap it up. Yeah, some good jokes there at the end. Oh, what a great divisional weekend. And this will not be the end of the content for this week. Not even close. This is a great start. We had to go through so much today, but we're so glad that we could at least do something. So it sort of feels somewhat of a relief. I'm sure we're both a little ticked off about the whole other situation still. I'm sure Emmy is especially, but we got this done. We got this out to you guys, and that's all that matters. We found a way. That's the motto. Find a way to get it done.
Yep.
We can come up
It
with something.
is what it is.
Yep. So we're sort of raw. We're raw prospects in the live streaming area of podcasting. But, we're going to figure it out eventually.
Yeah, we
It's going
go
to
in
take
with no protection. We go in with no protection.
exactly. So, with that being said, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review, or if you don't like the content, maybe don't do that. But regardless, if you love sports, that's what we're here for. We love sports, and that's why we go through all this trouble to talk about it. So, if Emmy doesn't have anything else to say,
Yeah,
just
I'm all
like
good.
just like the Tennessee Titties and Ryan Tannehill, the Green Bay Packers and overzealous Aaron Rodgers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the GOAT, Tom Brady, and finally, Bills Mafia, Josh Allen, poor Josh Allen, and the Buffalo Bills franchise. We are going.
Peace out.